the worst case scenario, if I tried and failed, was that I would be an unemployed person with narcolepsy living in my mom's basement. That's what could happen if I tried and failed. Well, if I didn't try, the worst case scenario is the same outcome. And I've found that's often the case in situations.
What's up? Welcome to Life in a Show. I'm your host, Jason Wojo. On the Life in a Show, we help people make more, work less, and live better. I am joined by Polish Peter, my co-host. What's up, dude?
Hey, man. So looking forward to this interview. I hear there's going to be an amazing guest that we have in here that you met somewhere. What?
Yep. Yeah, I met Michelle. Her name is Michelle Weger, and she gave a presentation at a Keep Partner Day. I'm a certified Keep partner, and I do stuff with Keep.
I still don't know how they let you in there, dude.
It's the good looks, bro. Come on. I mean, look at this.
Good looks. Okay, so they need to update their looks criteria.
And so I heard her speak and give this talk, and it was awesome. And I don't want to give it away yet, but she has a substantial challenge, a very real challenge with narcolepsy. And you might think, like, first of all, what is narcolepsy? And this is kind of like when you fall asleep uncontrollably, randomly throughout the day. And I'm sure, like, by the way, I don't think maybe there's some listeners that have narcolepsy as well, but my guess is that most people don't, and they may be wondering why they should listen to this episode. What would you say?
Yeah, I think you should listen to this episode because think about it this way. Every single one of us, at some point, we have challenges in life, right? We have these valleys. We have certain things, whether it's your own health. Maybe you have a health issue, or you have someone in your life that you have to take care of. And now, how do I go and do the business? Because she's going to talk about how she started her business after she got diagnosed with narcolepsy, right? I'll give you a little hint here. But the thing is, why do you do that? How do you do that? How do you actually create a business in such a way that in spite of stuff that you have going on, you know? So I want to encourage every single listener to look from the perspective, if you have some kind of challenges in your life, whatever it might be, this episode will be really helpful for you to see how you look at those situations, how you assess. She talks about a couple of cool different ways that she's looking at those things, the mindset stuff that's going to be very helpful to them.
Yeah, man. We get into mindset, we get into tactics, we get into like really using data. She's an inspiration. She's awesome. You're going to love this episode. Here is our conversation with Michelle Weger. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us. I'm super excited to have you on Life in Our Show.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. I'm excited for this.
You know, you are a first. We've never had a guest like you, and I'm curious. And by the way, I'm sure you get that a lot. Like, I'm sure there's not a ton of people with your condition out there. But tell people where this started for you and what that was like when you first made the realization, like, this is actually a big deal, and this could affect the rest of my life.
It's a great question. So I was always super driven, and the plan from, when you're 6, grade 1, they ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? And there was 2 options, either an astronaut writer, because you can't just be one, right? Or a brain surgeon. Those are the only 2 options available. And as the years went on, the astronaut writer, it kind of slipped off to the side. And so the plan was neurosurgeon. And that was what I was doing. That's what I was working towards. And then when I was in my first year of university, I was in a really prestigious program where only 10 people get into it a year. Super tiny. Diagnostic cytology, they call it. Essentially the study of cells. It's pretty much just pre-med as far as that exists in Canada. And something really awful happened during the big test, the test that's worth pretty much half your marks. And I went into it. I was prepared. I'd studied. I was going to nail it. And a couple hours later, I woke up and my eyes hurt so badly because I'd fallen asleep on the microscope in the dark room.
During the test?
Whoa.
The whole test, they gave you 10 slides and you had to say like cancer or not cancer, essentially. Well, abnormal or normal. But that was the idea. Dark room, silent. I was done. And it was the first time that had happened to me that in such an extreme situation. And so I couldn't, there's no redoing the test. Everyone has the same set of slides. And so I had to leave the program because of that and switch. And that was the first moment where I realized there's something super wrong, more than just normal. Everyone's tired in first year university. You're having your Fridays and Saturday nights, but this was probably a Tuesday. Like there was no party on Monday nights. Something was really wrong. And so I started going to the doctor. And even when I told them, like, I fall asleep in certain classes, statistics was the worst. The number of times I call it the bob and weave, like you do the nod off, you try and hold yourself up, but you eventually fall down. Yeah. And that's pretty boring, right? But it still is not normal for it to be within 5 minutes of every class.
Wow. And so, what did they tell you? Like from what I gathered when I heard you speak, and by the way, for everybody listening right now, I had the incredible chance to hear Michelle talk at a Keep event, which was awesome. And that's why I'm like, we got to get her on the show. So what happened after that? Like it sounds like there was a little bit of like it took some time to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, it does. So I went to the doctor and they said, oh, your iron must be low. Eat more eggs. Like, okay, so I eat more eggs. And then it's thyroid. And then they say, oh, well, you could be depressed. And I'm like, well, I'm going to be depressed if my life keeps falling apart, right? Like they would go, and it's what doctors do. And in most cases, it's right. You start with the most common things. Chances are first year university students living in residence, having fun on weekends, they're not sleeping well or not eating the right food. So it made sense what they were checking. But once those ones were done, they just kept circling around them over and over and over again. And it was none of that. And so it wasn't actually until I was out of university and I actually had a friend who has narcolepsy. She's one of the only narcoleptics I've ever met in my life. And, as girls in the early 20s do, we would have sleepovers, particularly when both of those girls are sleepy. You start watching a movie and next thing you know, it's tomorrow morning. And she told me, you definitely have narcolepsy. You have to get a sleep study. Keep pushing your doctor to get a sleep study. And so I did, and I got that sleep study, and I was diagnosed within days after that with narcolepsy.
That is insane. So what was the period of time between that first episode and doctor visit till the final diagnosis? How long were you looking at?
So 4 years between when the first time it was very clear there's something definitely not normal going on to that diagnosis. Wow. And I'm super fortunate because 10 years is the average diagnosis time for a narcoleptic. Wow.
And so people, and now, by the way, just because you're not diagnosed doesn't mean you're not seeing the real tangible effects of this in your life. And so you're still having this experience is normal, like on a regular basis during that time period. And then you got diagnosis. And so okay, so you get the diagnosis, and yet is that relieving to you? Is there a sense of closure, or is it open up a whole new can of worms?
Yeah, it's a really great question. So it's very mixed emotions. On the one hand, there's no more question of what it is. And there's huge relief in that because the unknowns are, the what ifs. Do I have brain cancer? Do I have some rare thing that hasn't been discovered? Like all the things that your brain goes off in tangents on when there's unknown. Those are closed quickly. But then there's other things that happen really fast. For example, my driver's license was taken away immediately, which, that's fair. But I had just, but I had just bought my first ever car on a 7-year payment plan. And you can't just return it because, it turns out I have narcolepsy. So that type of thing was really difficult, going from feeling very independent despite having this unknown situation going on to all of a sudden having to call my mother to ask her to drive me places in my own car so that it didn't fall apart from sitting in a parking lot. Wow.
Mm-hmm. And so here you are. What were the thoughts that went through your head as far as like, okay, how much is this going to, and by the way, and forgive my ignorance on the subject, but does narcolepsy remain relatively constant throughout your lifetime once you have does it get worse or better at certain times or certain triggers? Are there things that influence it? And basically the reason I'm asking is because you still have your whole life ahead of you and you got to figure out how to navigate this.
Mm-hmm. You nailed it, Jason. So it gets worse and worse at the beginning. So essentially what happens is there's this chemical in your brain called orexin. It's the sleep-wake hormone. So when you open your eyes in the morning and it's dark, your brain goes, go back to sleep, Jason. And you do most times. If you open your eyes and it's really bright because it's in the middle of the day, you will feel more awake. Same thing with screens. It's why they say not to use screens when you're in bed or screens when it's dark. That's normal.
Mm-hmm.
And this chemical disappears. It's autoimmune in the sense that something triggered my body to eat all of its own orexin until there was none left. And so there is this decline at the beginning. I think it's why pretty much no one can say when they first started being narcoleptic, because the beginning of it, you're just getting more and more tired. But there is a point at which it's not okay, and it's clearly not okay. And then it gets worse until you're out. Once you're out, it doesn't get worse than that in terms of more symptoms, but the cumulative effect of sleep debt over a lifetime, there is an impact to that.
Got it. Well, and so how does it show up for you? Like when you, what are some of the effects that this has in your day-to-day activity? What does it influence how you do things and what you can do?
Yeah. So when I started a business, it had to be fully virtual. I could not have in-person client meetings, which, post 2020, that's very normal for us all. But when I first started this business, it was 11 years ago. That was not normal. That was a really weird thing to do, to say that's actually not an option, regardless how much you pay me. You can't have an in-person meeting. You can't have a meeting before 10. You can't have a meeting after 5. Like all of these restrictions, I had to be very realistic about. I had to know at what points of the day am I most likely to be good enough to, at the time, hide from other people that there's something weird about me, because I didn't want them to know for a lot of those early years. And that took a lot of self-reflection. I couldn't have more than 2 meetings virtual during a day because the amount of energy that took while I was still learning became to be too much. And I had to be really strategic. So I had, you'll see here, it's really bright. So the house we're in now has a full 13-foot wall and 11 feet of it is windows. There's windows, lights everywhere. Those type of things I've learned over time. Lots of coping strategies. None of it makes it go away. None of it makes me normal, but it makes it easier to compensate strategically.
So I got a question for you, because you just mentioned like you got diagnosed with narcolepsy, right? And then soon thereafter, you decide to start a business, right? So who starts a business? Because I've had a lot of conversation with different people, and when they feel like, let's say I got some kind of a, diagnosis, or I have something that I can't do, right? The conversation of can't do, I always go on, decide to go start a business. Like who starts a business kind of thing when that kind of condition?
I mean, clearly a crazy person, right? That part of
that's the one in my book, right?
Right.
But listen, but that's what I'm trying to get at. What is your mindset in that time, right? To go and start doing that anyway.
That's a great question. So it was based on fear above all else for me. So I learned about narcolepsy. The only person I knew at the time was my friend, and she was unable to work. She barely left her house because of how bad her narcolepsy was and how much it affected her. She'd broken so many bones from falling down. There was just all these things. And so she was my only example.
Mm-hmm.
And they looked at that, and there is medicine that helps. It does not make it gone, but it definitely helps. And it's very expensive. And so when I looked at the situation, I figured I could try and sneak into like a government job, and hopefully they wouldn't notice that I was napping until it was too late to get rid of me, right?
They probably wouldn't notice.
Yes. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I think you're right. But I just couldn't, it didn't take me long of sitting with that idea where I was supposed to be a brain surgeon.
Right.
I can't do that. That'll be awful. And so, I mean, thank goodness I didn't end up being one. That would be a whole other story. But, I looked at it and said, I think the only other option is to make something for myself. And my parents, my mom worked at a hospital and my dad was in the Army. We didn't have any family friends that owned businesses. I didn't know anybody. And so I didn't really even know how to do it, but I had the impression that it was the only way that I could control things the way I needed to and have success, hopefully. So it started from a place of fear of what it would look like for me if I didn't take that chance. And the chance of starting a business was less scary, less risky for me than the alternative.
Hey, we'll get right back to our episode, but before we do that, we want to tell you about something super special and important that I want to make sure you know about, and that is our Life in Air events. There are two in particular that I want to draw your attention to. One is called the Get a Life Getaway, and we've been doing this for almost 15 years now. Peter and I have been doing this together for about 8 years together, and then we have our Business Builder Workshop. And this is why it's so important, because if you don't have the ideal life you want, guess what you need? A vision. A vision is something that we create at the Get a Life Getaway. And listen, it takes us a full 3 days to do that. And so we've been doing this for so long. We've refined the process. We've perfected it. We've walked almost 10,000 people through this process, and we want to show you this process. Now, yeah, you could probably try and do it on your own, but why would you try and reinvent the wheel? Let the experts, let us hold you hand in hand through this process. Peter and I teach these personally. You're getting this right from us. And that's the first part of this equation. Now, the second part is like, hey, let's say you decide that you want to work 20 hours a week and you need to make $100,000 to live your vision. Well, guess what? We teach you at the Business Builder Workshop. Exactly that. We will walk you hand in hand and show you our proven process to remove you from your business, to help you make the money you want, to enable you to own your business rather than have it own you. Peter, these events are awesome, man.
Oh yeah, we do these throughout the event, throughout the years, and we're doing them throughout the country. So head over to one of these events, because you'll be surprised how amazing it is to write your vision for your life. I wish somebody would have told me this 10 years ago to do that. When I came here to this country, I had no freaking clue what a vision is, whether to actually write it. So the fact that you're sitting here on this podcast and hearing this message, I would encourage you that this is something that you would go ahead and do that sooner than later. So how do they go about doing that, Vojo?
Well, and Peter, not only that, but we have a very special offer for them. Because you are a loyal podcast listener, I know you're tuning in every single week, hanging on every word. You've given us reviews, ratings, thumbs up, told your parents about it, your mom, your dad, your dog, your neighbor. We are giving you a 50% off, 50% off special offer. So you'll go and choose either the Business Builder Workshop or the Get a Life Getaway. Like Peter said, we do these all over the country. We do about a half dozen of these events per year. And when you check out, after you choose which event you want to attend, then you will enter the promo code PODCAST. PODCAST. Podcast is your promo code. You'll instantly get 50% off. And we will see you at an event soon. Now, here's my advice. Don't wait to attend this. Don't wait to register. Put it on the calendar now. Go right now. Pause the podcast. If you have to, go open a browser, go to lifeinair.com, enter that podcast promo code at checkout, and we will see you at an event soon. Let's get back to the episode.
Well, and the other thing I'm hearing from you is you went and decided to take stuff in your hands, kind of a thing. You didn't go like, okay, I give up. That wasn't the conversation, right? Was there an option for you?
Oh, I mean, in the first couple, I would say nights, but let's be honest, I was not up at nights. I was sleeping by 8 p.m. But, first couple afternoons, woe is me was the theme of everything. This is the worst. This sucks. I have no chance. My life is over. And then that got old really fast because I wasn't okay with that just being the end for me. And so I had to take it into my hands. I started looking up stats about other people with narcolepsy, and that was depressing as well. There's very few people with narcolepsy that I came across at that time, at the very least, that were successful and were self-sufficient and had the type of career that I had always expected for myself. And so it seemed pretty clear that if I didn't have the power, I didn't choose something where I had the most control, that there was very little chance of success.
Right. Wow. That, I'll tell you, I think that's a situation that a lot of people find themselves in from an analogous perspective, not the same issues, of course, but it's like you have these choices, and okay, I have this one over here, and I can let this thing beat me, this obstacle, this problem, and I'm just going to roll over. And what's the point? And then you have this other option. It's like, you know what? I'm gonna give it a shot, and I'm gonna try to make things happen. I'm gonna do my best. But talk to me about because that can be scary too, because some people feel more comfortable just kind of giving up right from the start, because if you try and you fail, it can be harder to swallow than leaving the dream alive that if I wanted to do something I could, but I'm just going to stay here because it's safe, and not try because then I can't fail. Like, so how did you find the courage to kind of step into that and not, and by the way, like there's also a theme here that ties into this similarly is when you had those doctors telling you the wrong stuff and you knew that this, and you tried it and it wasn't working. And so I think there's a theme there as well. And there's some things to unpack as far as like other people telling you what's going on versus you knowing. And so talk to me a little bit about how you actually like, was it purely just fear and you're like, well, screw it, I may as well try? Or how do you really kind of like encourage someone to step through that if they're facing something like this?
Yeah, it's hard,
yeah.
Right? And it's very much, I am a huge fan of looking at the realistic situation of what is the best and worst case scenario on either side. So the worst case scenario, if I tried and failed, was that I would be an unemployed person with narcolepsy living in my mom's basement. That's what could happen if I tried and failed. Well, if I didn't try, the worst case scenario is the same outcome. And I've found that's often the case in situations, and narcolepsy is rare, right? So when I'm saying comparing situations, it's not just people with narcolepsy. Maybe one of your children has a chronic illness. Maybe you got divorced out of the blue or lost your partner. Maybe now all of a sudden you're caregiving for a parent that's aging. These things happen to everyone at some point in their life. It's not a story about narcolepsy. It's a story about obstacles and how you choose to deal with them or not. And I find that in so many situations, the worst case and the no action case are almost identical. Versus on the flip side, if I try and succeed, I only needed a small amount of success to be in a slightly better scenario. I only needed to make just enough to pay for rent and some food, and I was already not in my mommy's basement. If I did a little bit better than that, then maybe I could even buy like nice clothes sometimes. A little bit better than that, I could do maybe once every 5 years, I could go on a vacation. Imagine that, right? It's like I looked at each part, not just the extremes. I think a lot of people, you look at only the 10 out of 10 best ever, most successful narcoleptic in the world, if I'm that, versus nothing. But there's so much along this spectrum, and every point past the first one was an improvement. So then it becomes logic. Why would I not bet on me? Because 99 out of 100 scenarios are a better scenario than today.
Yeah. There's some gold in there I want to kind of unpack a little bit, because that's, wow, such a valuable frame for proper perspective in terms of like what are, best case, worst case, realistic. How did you was this a process of you just saying to yourself like, hey, what's just a little bit better here, and like kind of look at the micro steps?
Exactly it.
Okay. And then what about, go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, and what about like, let's take this down to a kind of like an actionable way to do this. And so I heard about the mindset around it. I heard about the practical steps, the small stepwise increments that lead to this super cool direction. And it takes time, and there's a long path in either direction, maybe. But how about when you're trying things? This is one area that we haven't discussed yet, is like, as you're trying things, how are you determining and continuing to explore what works and what doesn't work? Because in your case, for instance, like you mentioned the lights, like, so, and this is the same for everybody, because everybody has these little things that don't work and some things that work, and being tuned into that is super important. So talk about how that worked for you to continually move you forward.
So I think having that level of self-awareness and accompanying documentation of it is a superpower that every single person can have, and most aren't going to be willing to do it. So for example, I know that if I do not finish at least one of these giant waters per day, I will feel less optimal. Good and bad, that's such a relative thing. It's just not part of the equation for me. I'll feel less optimal than if I do. In a perfect world, it's 4 liters of water a day. That's not in a realistic world. So I started documenting using the easy water example of how much did I drink in a day and how did I feel? Same thing based on time of year. So I know that the week that just passed to where we're filming this is when the daylight savings happens. It is the worst week of the entire year, every single year. And in the first years, I started to, I wouldn't remember that it was that bad. In my head, spring forward, where I lose an hour of sleep should be worse. And so every year during the fall, I would get in my head like, oh, is the medication not working? Am I getting seasonal depression? Like, what is happening? And then by being able to document year over year, you can flip back to things. And I realized that every year, this week is awful. And it's awful because of the dramatic shift in less light for me as an individual. I don't know how it is for normal people, but that doesn't matter for me and my optimization. What matters is how it affects me. And I think that's where generalizations, they're a great place to start. But if you're able to document what helps you taking steps forward, trying different things out, good and bad, you're able to create a formula for yourself that's super powerful.
Do you ever let your foot off the gas with that? Or you always, this is part of what you always do? Like you're just continually optimizing.
So yes and no. For me, if I'm at the very least, I need to continue to do what does work and be aware of if I'm self-sabotaging, and that can be an intentional decision. You know, sometimes I just want to eat half a bag of all-dressed chips, and I know what that's going to feel like the next day. And
you're willing to do it anyway.
Yeah, it's an intentional
Right.
decision in those instances. I just want to make sure I'm being intentional because for me, the repercussions of certain things affect me a lot more than the average person. So a prime example of that is an event. If I go and speak at an in-person event, I have to take the full amount of medication for a day, which means the next day is essentially a write-off. I will have to have an entire day of sleeping, not lounging in the bed, watching Netflix, like sleep, to be able to compensate for something that high energy. And sometimes it's not going to be worth it. Not all events will be. But before I was aware of that, I would then take extra again the full amount again the next day. And now I have a day and a half I have to everything is a payback. You know, it's everything you get has to have something that you put into it as well. And for me with narcolepsy, it's very often afterwards rather than before, but I have to pay back those things.
Got it.
Wow, it's listening to you talk, it's pretty incredible, like, you know, how you are taking on life and doing all those things because, you know, that's part of your life. My question to you is this, because think about it this way. You started the business, now you got challenges, you're documenting, you're solving. So it sounds to me like in business and most business owners, once you start the business, it's all rosy, right? There's unicorns flying and things are doing well according to the schedule. Right? Yeah, and everything is just, you know, cool. So my question to you is this. As you're going in ups and downs, especially the downs, what keeps you going? What's the thing that is keep you like, you know, you could very well at any moment kind of say, you know what, I got enough of this. But what keeps you going? Is there a why back there that keeps you going with all this?
I mean, past the why of the fact that it's the alternative will always be worse for me of if I don't have this business, what else would I be doing? Probably won't be as great, probably won't be as flexible. But even past that, the downs even out the ups. Again, it's the same thing, right? If I want to go full out normal person, high energy, then I pay that back on the flip side. I believe the same is true for the ups. You have to get downs to have big ups. And after every big up, you'll have a couple in a row. And then there's going to be some major downs. And of course there is, because you can't stay, this is the baseline. You can't stay up here forever. It's not realistic. But I also believe that there's actually levels, more like stairs. And so you go up a level in the stairs and then you take half step back and that's cool. But then you're going to go back up if you keep persevering, or you give up and say, okay, well, I didn't want to be on this floor anyways. And you take that step back down again where everything is easier and there's less of those downs because you're comfortable at that level. You've achieved everything already on that level. But then the ups won't be as great because you're taking the step down rather than up.
Interesting. I think that's an encouraging kind of visual picture as well for people to kind of recognize that in their own lives too. To see, it's not like you fall off the building and have to start from zero. Like
Never.
Right? It's always just a just a little bit down and then maybe a little up.
I was going to use roll down the hill, but you decided to fall off the building.
I go
next
big,
level.
go big or go home, Peter. Right?
You're going to do it, just fall off the building, not roll down the hill.
Michelle, I have one area I want to kind of finish with. We have a few minutes left here, and you said it early on, and I want to dive into this a little bit too. Was where you said you kind of tried to hide this from people early on, and maybe I don't remember if you said shame or embarrassment or some sense of a negative emotion associated with this where you didn't want people to know about it.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about that, because that's like such a, and even at the Keep event, right? You had a moment there where something happened. You're like, see, and it was actually pretty amazing, frankly, like to witness how you kind of went through that.
Mm-hmm. So I had a lot of fear at the beginning when I was starting out that if people found out I had narcolepsy, that they wouldn't want to work with me. So new people wouldn't want to work with me. Existing people would fire me because what if she falls asleep while making my contact form? And it's so ludicrous now to think about it because it's such a major part of everything to do with my business. But I was so scared of that. And I think it's because it was a big part of the risk at the time. In those early days of business, I was doing it because it was my best chance of having something more. And so I wasn't willing to bring into it the risk of people finding out there's something wrong with me. And the deep irony is that once that became public, the business skyrocketed after that because everyone's got a thing. And I was able then to talk about, well, the reason I've been doing automation before most people even knew it was a thing outside a factory is because I had to, because I had less hours available in my day because of narcolepsy. That's why I'm so great at this. If I've done that for me, imagine what I can do for you. Like, it became such a core part of the messaging. Mm-hmm. And it was the biggest, scariest thing at the beginning. Wild.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Like, it's the very thing you were afraid of, like, actually turned out to be an incredible blessing in terms of like showing and not only equipping you with how to help other people, but actually like allowing other people perhaps to release their own fear and their own, issues going on that they now felt they could express as well. So I think it's awesome. Michelle, where do people find out more about you and learn more about what you're doing?
So I have my own website. It is michelleweger.com. That's where we have everything to do with speaking, advocacy, and content, author-related things. And there's links to all my social medias on there as well.
Well, Michelle, you may not be an astronaut author, but you are a rock star and you're awesome. So thank you so much for being on the show. And I know that a lot of people have been touched by this episode.
Thank you.
Dude, that was super cool. I really enjoyed that conversation. And there's a couple of things in particular that I think are so relevant and practical for people. Like, I know no one probably has the same condition as her, but like, look at the situation of everyone's life in regards to, number one, feeling, embarrassment or guilt or shame or not wanting people to know certain things about you. Mm-hmm. That's one area. We got something that is outside of her control that she could let beat her if she wanted to, and she refused not to. We have tactics in regards to how she kind of likes to optimize and figure out what works and what doesn't work. We have goal setting and mindset around these little sequential things that really move her forward. I mean, there's so much in this episode.
Yeah, there was a lot of it. And like you said at the beginning of this conversation, this outro here that, she talked about how, she was hiding it before. And I think that's a big thing for a lot of people. that, what if people find out? What if people find out about this about me and that about me, right? And that, I think, actually keeps people small, right? Doesn't allow us to grow. So I would encourage the listeners, as you're listening to them, what is it, the one thing that you're trying to hide? Maybe, I don't know, not everybody does it, but I think, for me, for a long time, I didn't speak out there because my accent, right? I hated it. I tried to, change it and all those kinds of things. And I could go on and on and on, do different things. But the thing is, when you finally let the cat out of the bag, in a way, you start to own it, and you're much more empowered as a person to be able to deal with it. And I think other people actually come alongside of you. Look at her, what she mentioned. She said, my business exploded after that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And because I think, people, naturally, they want to, people are good, I think, for most cases, you know what I mean? And they want to help others. They want to be surrounded by people who are, I think the age of that everything is great that some people are putting out there are over, and I love the fact that she's very authentic. She's realistic. And I think that speaks volumes. And that's why people align with her a lot.
Man, it's so true, because I think when you're open with people, you're showing that you're truthful, you can be trusted, you are a real person, you have flaws, and no one is perfect. And so this allows, I think, a level of connection with people that, that really is valuable. And I find it so awesome that the thing she was afraid of the most actually turned out to benefit her the most as well. That's such a cool thing. And so for our listeners, if you're struggling with something like that, consider that, you might be, you might be hurting yourself and hurting others by not sharing and being open with that. Man, one of the other favorite things that she mentioned I thought was valuable is this continual process of optimization of, hey, and documenting it, right? Actually remember, because our memory is faulty at best. And so documenting things and writing it down, and then also using that to move forward in these little baby steps, man. That's kind of not her words, but mine is baby steps, and just
1% every day.
Yeah. What's 1% better every day. Right. It's, that is so, so cool. And then what I really, really liked is she's when she said, hey, I could not do anything and I'm going to be, basically unemployed, living in my mom's basement, or I give it a shot, which has a chance of success, which could actually get me out of this. And worst case scenario is I'm, unemployed, living in my mom's basement. And so when you actually think that through and you realize you're right, I'm screwed, I'm going to go for it. That kind of really kind of comparison of outcomes can be so valuable.
Yeah, and I think because people, when they're looking in their mind, they don't actually play it out kind of like that, what she did. Yeah. This fear becomes ambiguous kind of thing. And we start playing out the worst case scenario that's actually worse, that it doesn't have a chance to actually happen. You know what I mean? But if you start playing out in what she was doing, both cases, if I try it and I fail, or if I don't try it, I end up in the same position. So why not just try it and go for it? One other thing that I really love that she was sharing is that when she had this, narcolepsy and this constraint, right? She has a very narrow window to make the business work. So that's a pretty strong why. What popped into my head. I mean, I'm not in this level, but remember my story is I had to get the business between 10 and 2 o'clock, right? Yeah. But she has a very narrow window to make this work. So the biggest thing that she had to do is automate the business. So because of that thing, it actually helped her build the business to be much more successful, because most people don't put those kinds of constraints on themselves, or they don't have those constraints on themselves, and they want to do everything. No, I'm doing, or I'm better than everybody else, and nobody can do it as good as me, and blah, 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 all those kinds of limiting beliefs, right? For her, all those limiting beliefs basically went out the window, because she had those constraints that she had to really go and, okay, I need to automate this business because I don't have a very narrow window here.
Yeah, she had to. Right. So by necessity, she invented this approach.
And I think she helped them big time.
Yeah, it's awesome. We get to interview so many cool people on the show. It's awesome. I love this. Well, listen, we hope you loved it too. If you got something out of us, please leave us a review, leave us a rating, give us a thumbs up. This is how we reach more people. This is how we can change the world together, by empowering entrepreneurs to do the things that they can do within their control to make the best outcomes available for themselves and their loved ones. We will see you next week, everyone. Take care.